Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well, excited to be here. If you're listening in real time, you're picking us up after we've just had an academic break, and we've got an exciting new format for you. We've added in a new section. So the original format of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is we cover 3 topics. We're still going to be doing that, but our last topic that we're going to be covering today, we're going to be delving into the world of being a practitioner in practice. So we're bringing back Practice Matters after much request. So let's see what you can expect from episode 136. We're kicking off with when your notes are requested. That's an interesting topic. So when your notes are called for and you need to hand them over, how do you go about that? We've got check-in with CPCAB, where Rory, you spoke to Kelly Budd and you spoke about student support networks during your time of study. Can you give us a kind of an indication of what we can expect?
Absolutely. Kelly quite rightly outlines how useful it is for students to come together and have maybe a supportive group, a meetup, or maybe something online, so that they can support each other through the journey of counselling training. Especially important, I would say, if you're doing a level 4 or above course where the pressure can sometimes really be on.
Oh, it can indeed. Support so needed, specifically during counselling study. And then our last topic today, that is where we're delving into Practice Matters. We're going to be speaking about best practice in note-taking. You know, if you maybe studied note-taking last time where you were at college or university, times they have changed. The legislation has changed. What is now best practice? So we're going to be looking at that as our last topic. But kicking us off, episode 136, talking about when your notes are requested. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Yes, indeed. And you're sitting there maybe enjoying a coffee and the phone rings and someone says, hello, this is XXX Police. We would like you to send your notes for client Bill Smith, not a real client. Could you send them on? And how do you respond to that? And what do you do? And this does happen. It's happened to me. I know it's happened to Ken. And I'm just going to go through the steps that you need to take. And it's not unusual, certainly as people now are taking perpetrators of abuse to court, for the Crown Prosecution Service. I'm speaking specifically in the UK, and I may even be speaking specifically in England because the laws in Scotland and Northern Ireland are different. But what usually happens is if someone goes to court and takes a perpetrator to court, what happens is that as part of the evidential chain, if they're having therapy, then what happens is the Crown Prosecution Service will ask for the therapist's notes, and they will be shared with both the defence and the prosecution. And usually what happens is a police officer will phone you up and say, can we have your notes? So the first thing to do is, if it's from a mobile phone or a phone number you don't know, take a note of that number. If it's from a mobile phone, ask for a landline. Take the person's name on there, and if they've got a collar number, if it's a police officer, and then just park that for a second. Now, under general data protection regulations, it's the client who has the power here, and it's the client who has the power to release the notes or not. So just to be clear, there's only 3 situations where client notes can be released, where the client says, that's fine, just release them. Under a court order, so a judge then sends you a court order saying you have to release them under law, or a coroner asks for them. Those are the only 3 events where you have to release the notes. So my first reaction would be just to contact the client and just say, I've been contacted by the police. They want your therapy notes. I'm just checking if you're okay with that. And if the client says yes, it's a very simple procedure. You just get a release form. You type up a release form, and the release form says, that the client is happy for you to send the notes on to the police. And then you contact the police and make arrangements for them to be sent on. Really, really simple. And I think we need to be respectful to our colleagues in the police here. They're doing their job. Their job is to investigate crime. But they know as well as most practitioners that you can't just send your notes. You can't just send them without recourse to certain ethical protocols and, in fact, the law itself. So you would contact your client. I'd also contact your insurance company because they'll want to know. And when this happened to me, I phoned my insurance company and their first question was, have you sent them yet? And I said no, and they went, good, we'll come back to you. And I had a long conversation with my insurance company about what I'd done, how I'd spoken. Did I even declare that the client was a client of mine? How did I know that the people who contacted me were real police officers? And we went through a long checklist. And eventually I said, well, the client said it's fine. That's great. Just, you can send them off. And we sent them off. And interestingly enough here, Ken, when I came to renew my insurance, the first question they asked me about a year later was, what happened when you sent your notes off?
Yeah, they note it because it's important. Your notes, and the thing I always consider when we cover a topic like this, it's an important topic. You've mentioned, Rory, that there are 3 instances where we're kind of obligated to hand over those notes, and you've explained what those are. But we need to take that into consideration when we first meet that client, because that client needs to be empowered with that information. This is something that should be covered in your contract with a client. So when you're going through your contract, you might have a clause in there saying, I take notes during our sessions, and then you might talk around how you take those notes, how they are stored, and then you would explain when those notes need to be handed over.
Yeah.
You don't have a choice in 2 of them. I guess the other one is, well, you don't have a choice in all 3 of them because the client can request their notes as well, but at least you can have a discussion. But when the coroner rings you up, you got to hand them over, and that's that. The notes are going. And it's worth considering, and our last topic today is best practice in note taking. It's really worth considering what you're writing in those notes, what you're going to be handing over. And of course, there's some pitfalls here as well. So an example is a client asking for their notes. It's well worth having a discussion with the client what they want them for. And I'm going to just bring a hypothetical example of a client who is maybe going through a court case. And they have entered into counselling because they feel that it will reflect favourably on the court case that they may be going through, and they may ask for the notes to be introduced into the court case. And the thing that happens there is when your notes are opened up in court, then they're of course opened up to everybody, so you can have cross-examination on those notes as well. So it is a bit of a sticky area, I guess.
It is, and thank you for bringing that in, Ken. It starts at the contract. You're absolutely right. When you contract, you explain who can access that information. You give a client a copy of that contract to go away with. So it's all transparent. It's all upfront, and the client at that point can make a decision. And what I would say is that I've had a number of requests through the years for notes. Some of them have been legitimate, i.e. police officer phoning up, and I do the due diligence, and then I phone back the station and speak to the officer, and then I usually get them to request it formally, send me an email from a email address that is obviously legitimate. But I've had a few people who phone me up, and when I've asked for a landline, they've said, "Oh, we only have a mobile." In which case, I just put the phone down. Yeah. Because there's no office in the world, there's no practitioner in the world that doesn't have a landline, and it's only happened on one occasion. And I am pretty sure they never phoned back. I'm pretty sure it was someone who was just doing a bit of fishing. Yeah. So that's the first thing, and always be polite. This is not a you and me situation. Our colleagues in the police or the Crown Prosecutor, be polite. They're just doing their job, and when we have to work with them professionally. The other aspect is who owns the notes. Now, this is an interesting one. As a private practitioner, I own my notes. So I'm in charge of GDPR. I'm in charge of writing my notes. But if you work for an agency, it may be that they own them. And if you store your notes on your agency, as a lot of people do now, actually the agency can be requested them and you don't have a say. So it's very well worth thinking what you put in your notes. We're going to cover this at the end of the podcast. But if you work for an agency, almost certainly it'll be the agency that's contacted. And certainly when I work for an agency, the police would contact the agency, not the therapist.
100%. And there are just so many things to keep in mind with this. Another one's just come to mind now. When you are maybe going into placement and you're interviewing for placement, that's a great question to ask during your placement interview is, how does the note-taking process work? Who holds the responsibility of those notes within an agency? Always look to their policies and procedures. They should have them in place. That should be made clear as you make it clear to your client in that first session. And of course, just as we leave this topic, when it comes to handing over notes, you're not always required to hand over every note you've taken. Sometimes you can ask if you can do a précis or a summary of the notes, and it is acceptable. It depends on the circumstances, but if your notes are requested, as Rory has said, first thing is get hold of your supervisor, get hold of your insurance company, and speak to the client, and where you can, try to negotiate to hand over a report. That's where you go through the notes and pull out what you think is important and do a summary of that, rather than handing over your notes in their entirety.
Yes, in my experience, I offered to do a précis and I was asked, no, you have to send the notes. So I think it depends on who you're talking to. And I can remember in one case, when I worked for a charity, a client, it wasn't my client, but the client's notes being asked for by the police, the client wouldn't hand them over, and it got to quite a tense Mexican standoff where they said, well, get a court order. And the response was, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to. The client won't release them. We have to work within the law. And we never heard anything. But I do know that if they really want them, they will, a judge will put a court order in. Very unusual, but it does happen. And the other thing is not to worry. I think when the police phone up, maybe for a lot of people, it's like, I'm in trouble. Don't worry. You're writing notes about what somebody said. And as long as you've written them correctly, and this is the key thing, you've got really nothing to worry about. And, so that's what I'd say. It can be very nerve-wracking. I've had my notes requested twice by different police forces within a week after 14 years of practicing, and I've never heard anything. And it was quite nerve-wracking. But my supervisor assured me, so, well, you've got nothing to worry about. You're only writing down what the client said. That's it. So don't panic and speak to your supervisor and gain some support, if you're in college, maybe from your tutor. But yeah, it does happen, and it's happening increasingly more often.
We invite you to be part of this discussion. Have you got any stories you'd like to share? Obviously, keep clients' details out of that. But if you've been asked for notes, how you managed that and what you did, you can do that on our Facebook page, and just go into Facebook and look up Counselling Tutor. We are there. Go and get involved in the conversation. That's where all our topics come from for our episodes. Rory kind of left that subject saying that the key is that whether you've written the notes correctly or not. And we're going to leave that as a cliffhanger, because our last topic that we'll be covering in just a moment in Practice Matters is best practice in note-taking. But before we get to that, we're going to do check-in with CPCAB, our good friends. And you spoke with Kelly Budd about student support networks. Well, recognise, I've just mentioned the Facebook group. We've got tens of thousands of students in that Facebook group, and they are all so supportive of one another. If you've had a bad day, you can share that. Somebody can understand what it's like. If you've got a celebration, you've just got your certificate, you've just got your 100 hours, you can celebrate that, and there'll be people to celebrate it with you. So commiseration or celebrations, you can go to our Facebook group for that one. But support networks, so important, Rory.
Yeah, and Kelly really helpfully helps us out with the power of just keeping in contact with your peers when you're doing a course. And certainly we were talking specifically about level 4 and above, where it's life-changing. It can be quite fast-paced. It can be stressful for some people because there's so many different dynamics within a level 4 diploma in counselling or a degree. Sometimes just having a peer support group just to talk through and check things out is really useful. And Kelly outlines the different ways that people can do that.
Let's check in with CPCAB.
Check in with CPCAB.
And we're with Kelly. So welcome, Kelly. We've got a really interesting topic today, and that is student support during training.
Hi, Rory. Yeah, I think it's a kind of interesting angle, and we've spoken before about kind of where students can kind of draw their support from. And I guess with this, I'm thinking more about how they use their peer support network whilst they're doing their counselling training, and kind of the experiences that can lead to, and how important it can be.
Absolutely, and I think certainly in the level 4 training, although it does happen in level 3, people can become slightly unpacked a little bit in their world. They see the world differently. They see relationships that they may have thought were really rock solid and really respectful, and they may see them through a different prism, and that can
Yeah.
make people really unsafe. And sometimes people can act out on that, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's something really powerful about being with a group of people who are going through a very similar journey to you at the same time. So often, I know particularly students kind of often start off a course with a real interest in kind of bonding and creating kind of the perfect harmonious group with their peers. And then, like you say, things can become unpacked. You can deal with difficult situations, difficult emotions. And those people around you, it might be that you're having the difficulties in your relationship with them, perhaps, but they are also going to be one of your best forms of support going forward because they're in it with you.
Absolutely. And I do think if we talk about Uncle Freud, of course, is that sometimes there could be a bit of projection. People may not be able to project onto maybe a loved one at home their frustrations, and what they may do is project it onto a member of the group or members of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of kind of family dynamics that I've seen played out in training groups is just immense. I think it essentially it should come out in that form because then that allows you to kind of work through it. And the people that are with you in that kind of mix, I think they can be your best friends, actually, even if you're not best friends with them, because you'll learn so much from relating to them.
Yes, absolutely. So when we're thinking of putting support networks in, what do they look like?
I guess they can come in many, many forms. One of the things that made me wonder about doing this topic was because I saw some people posting on the Facebook group asking, do you socialise with your counselling group outside of the sessions? And there was a real mixed response to that. Some people did, some people didn't. Some people were very much kind of strongly in favour, some people very much against it. And it brought up for me a little bit of a memory of when I first did my intro course. My tutor put in the contract that we were not allowed to socialise with our peers outside of the course. And I always found that really surprising. She had her reasons, and I think a lot of it came from, I think she'd had some groups where there was real discord that had happened, and she didn't want that to leak out and become kind of like a social media out of the classroom kind of bullying situation. And so she'd essentially kind of clamped down and said, just don't socialise with your peers, treat it like a learning group and nothing more. But over the years of kind of working with groups, I've really seen that social network be so valuable to my students. And I think if you're able to create a form of a social group with your peers, whether it's in class or outside of class, whether it's, I've seen people that set up WhatsApp groups, that can go to your benefit, and it can also be quite difficult as well. But it's about kind of creating that connection and finding a way of making it really inform your learning personally and kind of academically.
Absolutely, and I think also there's something about kindness here, being kind. People go through all sorts of changes during counselling training. The health warning should be writ large, I think, because it changes the way you view the world. It changes your phenomenological view, and people find a voice, and people don't like each other. I remember when I did my training, long before Facebook, I have to say, that Facebook didn't exist, and we went around a residential and we were all asked to hold hands, and we all held hands. And I remember my trainer saying to me, "Why are you doing what you're told?" And he's like, "Well, what kind of an exercise is this?" But it did prove the point that it's quite a rigorous training.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be a very rigorous training. And I think kindness is really important. I think students, in order to kind of get themselves through it, they need to be very kind to themselves. And you do need to be kind to the people around you as well. And I think when it's difficult for you, when it's challenging, sometimes that's one of the first things that goes, quite sadly. I think I was and with the podcast, I'll attach a link to an article that I was reading around the Kindness Institute. UCLA have set up a Kindness Institute studying the practice and benefits of kindness. And what they're starting to show is that actually being kind, so being kind to other people, being kind to yourself, actually increases your lifespan. So it has genuine kind of physiological benefits when you're able to really kind of connect on a meaningful and warm level with people around you. And I think that's what often we're here in counselling training for, is we want to connect with people. So kind of you can practice all of that connection with your peers in a really good way.
Absolutely. And if we think of the therapy room, of course, that, sometimes we will have clients who project onto us, act out, and we have to be boundaried and we have to weather that storm sometimes. But I also think that, kindness is a great thing. When you talk about Roger's conditions or Clarkson's conditions or, whoever's the therapeutic kind of, the therapeutic mix. And that, in my experience, really, really works most of the time. And I think part of our difficulties, it's so easy, isn't it, to pick the phone up and post something a bit mean on social media.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the potential kind of downsides of having that sort of support network when it's not kind of on an interpersonal level that we would expect. Is I've seen with student groups, some kind of student WhatsApp groups really go down a dark spiral. I've seen people on Facebook groups where because they've lost the person in front of them, that anonymity leads to a real loss of kindness as well, that you would normally see in that person. That wouldn't be their normal way of being, but because it's in kind of a different forum sometimes. And I think that's what my tutor was warning us against all those years back of, it's great when it's great, but if it goes sour, it can go really sour. And actually then that can come back into your training group and can really affect your learning. So I think that kind of idea of use your support network wisely, actually be very wise within your support network as well. Treat it with kindness, treat it really gently, because those people are going to be important to you.
Yes, and I think I think for me there's something around when somebody does act out. It's an ideal time to draw on those counselling skills and those theories you're learning. And think, well, what's going on? As Roger said, all behaviour is goal-directed. So, and of course, the very famous one, of course, in the absence of threat, the organism can examine themselves and you effectively are saying reset. And I think that if you provide that in your training group, you'll find miracles happen. You really will.
Yeah. I think one of the quotes I like from the article that I'll link to literally says, meet unkindness with kindness. And if somebody is directing something at you and you'll find that really challenging, take a breath, think about what might be triggered in you. And rather than respond from your place, respond by saying, it sounds like you've had a really bad day.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
And just kind of offer that back to somebody. And I think kind of making that time for people. It's probably one of the most useful things that I ever got from my counselling training was the peers that I ended up being friends with.
Well, we've learned two valuable things here today, Kelly. One is that being kind pays dividends, and the other is that mean people live less longer.
That is true. Yeah, so be kind, because it's not only useful for you, but useful for others.
Yes. So, as always, Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rory. Have a good day.
Check-in with CPCAB is proudly sponsored by CPCAB, the only awarding body run by counsellors for counsellors. To learn more about CPCAB qualifications and to get more detailed information on today's podcast topic, visit cpcab.co.uk.
That was really useful, wasn't it? And certainly I know that some tutors frown a little bit on students getting together, but I always thought it was a great idea because, as I say, you can't do this on your own. And as Kelly really outlined there, it can sometimes be a bit of a lifesaver, if you've got a WhatsApp group or a close Facebook group, just to say, well, what was this theory? Or I'm not sure what to do here. And other people can come in and give you that support. It's a great idea. And as we live in a world of social media, it's a lot easier to do than ever before.
Indeed. And now that moves us into our last topic for episode 136 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and that is best practice in note-taking. And this, of course, is our new slot called Practice Matters.
Practice Matters.
And I just want to say at the outset here that Rory has actually created a super duper download that you can get free of charge. All you need to do is go to our website, which is counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, navigate to episode 136. This is an important handout. You can get it for free. Just put in your email, we'll send it to you. It's an example of note taking. And the thing with note taking is we take notes for each session. When a client leaves, you'll sit, you'll process, and you'll take those notes. But very rarely, maybe during study, but very rarely do we get to see another counsellor's notes. So having an example of note-taking is really, really important. So you can get that from our website. Go and download it. So what's your thoughts on best practice in note-taking, Rory?
Well, there's an interesting idea called SAPO, S-A-P-O, in note-taking, and it's subjective, assessment, plan, and other. And everything that we talk about in notes should be subjective. We should not analyse. So writing a note which says the client's talking about issues with their relationship, I wonder if it's because their early parenting was not very good and they got a difficulty with their father, is absolutely not really useful because you're interpreting. I think it's worth remembering that we're not considered experts. As counsellors, we're not psychiatrists. Some people might be psychologists, but for the majority of counsellors, we are writing down the facts. So firstly, what's firstly? I've invented a word. Firstly, they should be subjective, and they should talk about what the client has said. And really good, useful here is client stated, and talk about what the client stated they're having low mood. Client stated that they're really struggling in their relationship. Those are the client's own words, so that's subjective. And then you can move on to what's called assessment, which is the ensuing discussion. So, not everybody's a person-centered therapy. Some people may be doing CBT, some people may be doing an integrative course, in which case, if you're doing any form of kind of treatment plan, which happens in CBT, formulation, then you might write down what's been discussed. So it might be, if it's CBT, gave client homework on irrational thoughts, and they're going to bring it in next week. And then a plan. So what's the action plan? Clients will bring this in and we'll discuss it next week. So the ensuing discussion is about how you're going to work with the client's issue. The plan is what the outcome is. Now, of course, in person-centered therapy, it's not that easy, but you can talk about what they may change. The client might come and say, well, I'm really frightened of my boss and I'm not sure I can talk to them. And it might be, say, well, why don't you just try that and try saying that you're not really happy with the work rota and see where that happens. And client goes away and tries that. And then finally, other, what you need to do in order to be prepared for the next visit. So that can be, if a client's got a holiday, I won't be around for a couple of weeks, you can say, I'll be seeing the client in 2 weeks as the client is going on holiday. Or the client wants me to send them an email when I've come back from holiday, or any other thing, or any other referral. So they're very structured. So if anybody's looking at them, they're very, very structured, but there's no interpretation. So you're not mind reading, or you're not writing personally about the client. You're only talking subjectively. And as long as you do that, you really haven't got anything to worry about.
Yeah. Keep it to the facts is what you're saying there, Rory.
Absolutely.
What is actually happening, what you may think, what you may feel, what your intuition may tell you is not suitable in notes. Keep it to the facts that are in front of you. Your notes may start with how the person was referred to you, how they got to you, and then you pick up that person and their journey with you. So when we're talking about best practice in note taking, we need to recognize that as practicing practitioners, that the legislation changes, things change, technology changes. Back when I was studying, when I first started taking notes, I was taking notes on paper mainly. I was using what's called a split note system, where there were no identifying details on the actual notes themselves. There was just a number at the top, and that number represented a number of a file where the client's details were. So think about the security of the notes that have been taken. But I'm looking at that, and I'm sure that many people still do keep notes that way. But with technology kind of offering so many different choices, I guess now, Rory, so much is done electronically, where you're storing those notes maybe on your laptop, on a computer. And it's here where we need to really think, if we last looked at note taking when we were in college or university many years ago, it's really worth the deliberate practice of looking at it again, staying sharp. And Rory and I are of the belief that CPD, continuing professional development, is not just about new things, new presentations, new ways of working. Sometimes it's about looking at your practice as it stands at the moment and asking that question, what can I do differently? How can I be working differently? And of course, the recent legislation which is coming into effect is called GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. Came out in the EU, so we are subjected to it here in the United Kingdom, and it basically outlines how you can hold and store data and who has access to that, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that I would point anybody to look at the GDPR and how data's handled and how data's stored. I think if you're a private practitioner, you really need to understand that, and indeed, if you work for an organisation like the NHS, they may be offering training on GDPR. Take it up, because it really, really is important. And I want to make a bit of a point between client notes and process notes.
Ooh.
So yes, because that's really important. A client's notes are the factual information that a client talks about. Process notes, and there's a bit of a tradition in person-centered therapy, is how you're feeling. It's usually a journal that some person-centered therapists keep, where they talk about their own feelings, their own processes within the relationship. And it's not something that's taught a lot nowadays. That's my sense of it. But when I was taught, we were taught there's client notes and there's process notes. The thing with process notes is they're your own notes. However, when you're asked for your notes, they are your notes. So you can actually have your process notes or your personal diary asked for. It's not usual. They only ask really for client notes, but the law allows any notes on the client to be asked for. So if you are writing about your client in a journal or you're kind of processing that, you need to be thoughtful of that as well. And the handout does have the difference between client notes and process notes.
Thank you very much for that, Rory. And that's when your notes are legally requested, and keeping notes is about the security of those notes, how you manage those notes. So an example may be, just taking hypothetically here, you decide to keep the notes of your clients on your laptop. What happens if you lose your laptop? If your car gets broken into and they steal your laptop, how is that protected? Are they able to access that? How do you then access your notes? Is it backed up somewhere? Is it stored on a cloud? If it is it password protected? So there's so much to consider. GDPR, a massive one, as we've already covered. And we actually have a section in our paid for service. It's called our Counsellor Study Resources. And we've actually added a new level to that now, which is called Practice Partner, which is for qualified professionals, where we have lectures and we have documents and resources on basically working on your practice. And Rory, you've done two lectures that I know that are in there at the moment. One on GDPR and how it affects us as counsellors, and the other one actually just on note-taking best practice as well. So if you are a member of our paid-for service, pop in, have a look at that. Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by Backpack. Backpack is a user-friendly client management software product designed especially for counsellors and psychotherapists. It simplifies your workflow, takes the grind out of admin, and allows you to spend more of your valuable time with your clients. Get a 30-day free trial of Backpack and 30% discount by using the discount code CT2020. www.bac-pac.co.uk.
Well, yeah, and in a world of changing legislation and client protection, this sounds like a really, really good idea because, as Ken said, relying on your computer or relying on a little storage box with a lock on it may not cut the mustard anymore. So check that out. One final thing on note-taking is check with your insurance company how long you need to keep them. There are different rules for different insurance companies. So check with your insurance company and make sure that is in your contract, how long you keep them for, so that clients understand, how long they'll be for and how they're disposed of. But what a great episode. We started off with what happens if your notes are requested. Always a bit of a knee trembling, worrisome time for people and when the police phone you up. Checking with CPCAB with Kelly Budd. We talked about student support, building a student support network through the higher levels of counselling to support you on that journey of change. And finally, best practice in note-taking. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.